These are the pre-supplied templates, general purpose and data warehouse. They come complete with files. If you choose these, you're strictly limited in what you can do. You know, they're prepared, ready-made prepared databases. I use them all the time. Well, I use this one all the time for my own little demonstration systems because it's the quickest way to create a database. The quickest way is to run through this. But you don't see all the options. You don't use it for production purposes. You know, for production purposes, you will take custom. So taking custom, this, and for the purposes right now, this will show us all the options. We give the database a name. Now, any name will do. I'm just going to call mine JW. It's up to you whether you give it a sort of suffix. Could call it sb.com or whatever. It's entirely up to you whether you use domain suffixes. Remember, these domains are not TCP domains. What they are is you're setting a value for the parameter, show parameter db domain. You probably haven't talked about this. One wouldn't normally on this course, but a db domain is an optional instance parameter that some people like to use. Typically, if you have, through bad administration, you might have several databases in your environment with the same name. Giving them a db domain lets you tell them apart. Right. Otherwise, I'm never too sure what the value of it is. So if you put a domain here, like .whatever, you are in fact specifying that parameter. And that's what we'll see a lot of the time as we go through, is what we're doing is specifying parameters. So I'm not going to bother with it. I wouldn't normally do so. You can add one later. Everything can be changed later with one exception. That's the instance name, but default instance name is the same as the database name. For the sake of your sanity, you're probably going to keep them the same. But you can change that later as well if you want. The maintenance tasks. Have you talked about maintenance tasks, Dave? Or?
Yes, we've talked about auto tasks and the jobs, the nightly jobs that collect statistics.
Yeah. This will choose to enable them. Otherwise, you would switch them on and off later with DBMS auto task admin program. Auto _task admin. So what you're doing here when you check the enable auto tasks is when you create the database, you'll be setting the attributes, which is up here somewhere. You'll be running the procedure enable, and DBMS auto task enable enables the auto tasks, and all you're doing here is saying, hey, include that call when you create the database, so you can do that later on as well. Passwords, I shall set critical passwords to lowercase oracle, to lowercase oracle, and I'm going to get a warning about that not being nearly good enough. Yep. Where to put the files? Right, file system or ASM, that of course depends on your hardware. 99 times out of 100, you're going to say use a common location for all database files, and then you'll specify a path, or indeed use Oracle Managed Files. That's a matter of personal preference, and Oracle Managed Files were introduced in version 9, and when they first came along, I thought, I'll never use that. A couple of releases down the line, I wonder, how do I live without it? Yeah, so often that happens when Oracle introduces a manageability feature, and you think, I'm a real DBA, I won't do that. Life made easy, Oracle Managed, otherwise just give it a directory. There are various other options you can specify, we'll see more later on. You can hard code, you can override things, individual locations of files if you want. But generally speaking, remember, all of this can be changed later, with that one exception. Fast recovery area? Sure, why not? Archive log mode? I wouldn't enable it at this time. If you enable archiving at this stage, it's actually going to slow down the database creation significantly. And I would normally enable that later on. This allows you to control where your files are going to be. Oh, we've looked at that already, haven't we? And then next. What do we want to install? Well, this is you, Larry Ellison, and the law. What have you actually bought? And I think Oracle Text is now bundled, but you certainly have to pay for the rest. Standard database components. These ones are definitely free. And again, you'll choose what you want. You will probably disable Application Express because the bundled version is too out of date. It's the release as shipped with the base software, and it's really annoying. You check that, and the first thing you then do is remove it and install the current version. So you'll probably want to deselect that. I'm not sure if multimedia is standard. I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm going to deselect all of these just to make it quick, to make it fast.
Yeah.
I'll leave a couple of them in there.
Paywen, the Apex is a great web tool, and you'll definitely want, if you want to get involved in it, even as a DBA, you can build your own tools.
And next. Then we get the interface. This is where we can set various instance parameters, indeed all of them if we want. Now, here we're configuring memory. Are we going to use automatic memory management? I'm not going to, actually. It just takes defaults for... basically, we're setting parameters at this point. We can see them later on. Okay, all of these, and these are just the ones it's going to specify as its default values. You can change any you want. You can change them any later on as well.
Are these the basic parameters?
Yes, it is. It's pretty much the basic ones. It won't set any of the more complex ones.
Okay.
We can already see the one you can never change later. Got it? Remember, that's the one you can never, ever change afterwards. Do want to get that one right. And the way I look at it is that no DBA was ever fired for choosing 8K. DBA is as old as Dave and me. Keep going on about, use small blocks for some type of database, use large blocks for others. I strongly believe that that's ancient history. And many DBAs, better than me, now say it simply doesn't matter. I personally tend to choose 16, but not for any performance reason. The point is that if you're using normal standard table spaces, the block size limits the size of the data file. That one data file can be 4 million blocks, and that's the limit. So with 8K blocks, your biggest data file is 32 gigabytes, and that actually isn't very big nowadays. Whereas if you choose that, you can have 64 gigabyte data files. It gives you more room to maneuver. Character sets, yes, you can change character sets. You don't want to. You really don't want to change character sets, just like database name. Please use Unicode, which is not the default. I know you're both Americans. You can probably get away with the default. Right. The default is not good enough when you work in a multinational environment. When Oracle first introduced Unicode, there were a few bugs. But as far as I know, they've all been fixed since 10G Release 2. But all that means is I haven't found a Unicode bug since 10G Release 2. So I would strongly advise Unicode. It gives you better interoperability with Java, better interoperability with .NET in a multinational environment. It's pretty much essential.
John, can that be changed easily later?
With extreme difficulty. Yeah. You really don't want to change your character set later. It's worse than DB name. Right. Okay. Moving on next. And what do we have next? That's basically it. Here's a summary of what it's going to do. You can see that the file it's going to create. But all of this can be changed later. Some people would want to change the reader logs. The default for reader logs are really, really bad. You get 3 groups, and the members are only 50 megabytes each. And by default, they aren't even multiplexed. You will want to change the reader log configuration later, I can guarantee. The data file configuration, you will almost certainly want to adjust these sizes and things later. Frankly, I just wouldn't bother at this stage. The way I take it is there are a few decisions, like block size, database name, character sets. You want to get them right. Just get the thing created and let it get on, and then sort it out later on. The option I take here, create database, guess what that does? And then I always take generate database creation scripts. Sometimes I don't do that, because you might want to edit the scripts before you run them. What I'm going to do now, though, is just let it do the whole lot. And while it's creating, we'll walk through the scripts. So, finish. And OK. So it's generated the scripts. Done. And now it's generating the database. Right, well, while that's going, we'll take a look at the scripts. So, I find the scripts quite instructive and a good reminder of what's going on as well. So the scripts will have been created. If that font isn't good enough, let me know. But in the Oracle base directory, you'll find a directory admin. And in admin, you'll find a directory called JW, which is the name the database I just gave. And in there, what do we find? We find a directory called scripts. Right, and in there, the critical script is the shell script. So we'll begin with that. And if we look at that, here's what it's doing then. Umask, creating some directories, sets the Oracle SID variable, exports it, sets the path, and then tells you to edit the Auratab file, which we'll see later on. I think this release actually does that edit for us. We don't have to do that, but we'll see. And then it runs SQL plus /no-log at, and it's running the script jw.sql. So we then move on to jw.sql. vi jw.sql. Now, depending on the options you take, you're going to see different things here. I took custom database because that shows us everything. If you chose to create a database based on, say, the general purpose template, because what the general purpose template does, it's basically like a backup that it expands. So you see different commands here to do that. I think they talk about creating a clone database, I believe the terminology. But here, look what it's doing. There's a prompt for the sys password. There's a prompt for the system password. Then we have a host command or a PWD. Remember what that does? We're creating the password file at this point. So it's creating a password file, and then it runs a bunch more scripts.
So, Paywin, just the Aura PWD is where the passwords for sys DBA are stored, and that was the good interview question we spoke about.
Okay, create db.sql is the next one. So vi create, whoops, vu, vi create db.sql. Right. I love the script it generates. Yeah, it saves you a lot of typing. Logs on his sys, spools out to a log file, starts up no mount, off a parameter file. We'll look at that parameter file in just a second. But that's just a dummy P file that was created with the options we specified or accepted defaults for in the DBCA dialog. And here's your create database command. That's all one command. You can cut out a lot of this if you're doing it manually, but create database, give it a name. This stuff, max instances and log history, really only applies in a rack environment. Max log files, max log members. This is, the terminology is a bit loose. This is actually the number of log file groups. Our control file will be created with sizing appropriate for handling up to 16 log file groups, each of which could have up to 3 members. And overall, a total of 100 data files. Now, some of these limits are hard, and some of them are soft, and they keep changing more and more from hard to soft with each release. In release 11, I think these two are hard limits, and this is a soft limit. I'm pretty sure that's right with release 11. I'm afraid there have been so many variations. So what you will find is that if for any reason you wanted to have more than 16 log file groups, or your service level agreement said you need more than 4 members for each group, you would have to recreate the control file. Possible, but awkward. But on the other hand, those limits are going to be good enough for virtually everybody. This is a soft limit, which is just as well, because 100 is not very many. But that is a soft limit, I've proved that. Yeah, I'm sure it's soft with 11. But it does control the size of the file, of the control file. Then that's the data file for our system table space. 700 megabytes, auto extend on, next 10 megabytes, max size unlimited. This is an example of something you might well want to change later, but it's easy to change that later. Move it around, change its name, adjust all these attributes. Extent management local. Then the data file for your sysaux table space. Again, that's something you might well want to change later, and 700 and 600 are not very big. You might well want to change that, but they are on auto extend.
And there's also the resize option on the alter table space.
Yes, and what I would do is I would almost certainly resize it up to a couple of gigabytes. You don't want it being resized dynamically on the fly. You certainly don't want to run out of disk space because that fails. you want to have some stuff pre-allocated here. We're creating a temp table space, fine. An undo table space, okay. There's the character set coming in. And there's our redo logs being created. So these 50 megabyte log file groups, pathetic. And an awful lot of the databases are created with this default. not just by people like me when I didn't know what I was doing 20 years ago. They're created with this default by people right now. Dave and I have seen databases that were log switching every 3 seconds, and Oracle can do it, but it really doesn't like to. And they're setting the passwords. That's our first script. So going back to so we began by running createDB. Then it's createDB files, createDB catalog, JServer, context, and so on. Right, createDB files. Oops, what was it? createDB uppercase files. Right. So the next script it calls, this is just creating a little table space called users. Nothing special on that. If you've chosen certain extra options, you might well find extra table spaces being created at this point. Because these scripts are generated according to the navigation path from the dialog we took. Then there's createDB catalog. Right, we're running the scripts. At this point, the database has been created. It's been created at this point, but it's useless. It's useless because it's got no data dictionary views, it's got no PL/SQL procedures and packages, and these are the scripts that create them. Catalog.SQL, cat-block, cat-proc, cat-OTTK. These are creating all those PL/SQL packages and the DBA views that we need to use to make the database usable. Now, that's the workspace manager PLB. I think that's something to do with workspaces. Logging on a system, running pupbld, that initializes the SQL Plus environment. So these are just standard scripts that everybody runs. It's running them. You can see it's running them right now. At this precise moment, we are creating data dictionary views. We are right now at this stage. Right, and you can see what it's going to do next. It's going to add the JVM, add Oracle text, or the way we're going to do it. Oops, escape, colon, quit. It's going to run jserver.sql. jserver.sql is that bit. It creates thousands and thousands of Java classes. It's going to take a long time, and I rather wish I'd deselected it. Then it's going to run context.sql. That's adding Oracle text. You can see here, as you go through the DBCA dialog, you say, yes, I'll have context, but I won't have Enterprise Manager. All you're doing is generating scripts. And I'm sure you can work out that if you want to add the components later, you can just run the scripts.
Yeah.
We'll look at post-DB creation. I think there may be something interesting in that. Well, let's see, where's post-DB creation? Well, there's from there, post-DB creation. So the final script is going to run is it's going to do a recompilation of everything. That's the UTL recomp procedure. Creating an SP file. It's generating an SP file from the init file we created earlier, which I did say we would take a quick look at. VI, the little file it created. And right, it's setting the basic parameters. There's my block size. Yeah, and you can see DB domain, no dimension set to null. And there's the DB name. Control files, sure. There's the fast recovery area, and so on and so forth. It's just setting the minimum parameters you can get away with. And that's basically it. You can change them all with the exception of block size. Yeah, but as we've been saying, some of these things are pretty awkward to change later. You definitely want to change that. You wouldn't want to leave compatible back there. You might as well have the new features if you're using 11.204 rather than having it acting on the base release. And that basically is it. And this is working its way through. Let me just check whether it has indeed done the edit to Aura tab. Yes, I thought so. Yeah, 11G does add that line to Aura tab. DBCA does that. Even though, remember, the script actually told us to do it manually.
So what does this line do?
It just helps you set the environment. There's a script generated when you install the system called the Auraenv script. Then Linux, it's put into Auraenv. It's put into. You get a copy of it elsewhere as well. You get it. basically it's a script you just run, and
Okay.
it sets environment variables for you, and it reads this file, the Auraenv file, to work out what to set them to. Basically, it's just telling you there is a database called JW, it's its Oracle home. There's also a database called class, that's its Oracle home. And here you see the class database. Unix will automatically start it. That last field, the third field, oh, there's a spelling mistake. The third field says whether it should start automatically. It's a useful file as Auraenv, for shortcutting some of your database administration. And that's about it. How long it takes? Well, this is going to take a while, particularly when it comes to adding JVM. It's going to take quite a long time to work through that. I should have deselected it. Otherwise, it's still running the catalog scripts at this point. And that is DBCA in all of... That took longer than it should have done, didn't it? Sorry, I've taken longer than I meant. But anyway, that's DBCA. So seeing how my redo log looks now in this brand new database. Yeah, we had a log switch, my current log file group. My current group is group 3, and you can see the log switches. I had a log switch 24, 11, 24, 23. I had another log switch. It's 1 minute, 20 seconds later. Yeah. This is because I've got these little, I've got these little 50 megabyte log files. Yeah, the log switches are just too quick. Oh, this is a better one. Yeah, 2202, 24. Right. I'm log switching every minute, basically. Yeah, as we go through it. Okay, is that enough on DBCA?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great.
Okay, back to you then.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, John. How did you set up the encryption for SQLnet on that?
Piece of cake. You can do it with the GUI tools, or of course, I'm going to use the GUI tools actually. It'll be easier. It's dead simple. I'll use the GUI tools to configure it, and then we'll see what it's done. That'll just stop me making too many mistakes, and then we'll just see what it's actually done to the files. Encryption is really, really simple. It's just a couple of edits in a SQLnet file. So what I'm going to do is connect to the Oracle home. All right. I'm going to use the net. I'll use the net manager. It's another Java utility. It's going to be hellishly slow. So I'm playing a game of whether Java running slowly will save more time than me making typing errors. In the you can configure encryption at the client side, the server side, or both. Now, in the profile section, profile. What I'm doing here is editing the SQLnet.aura file. So I'm going to enable it, and then we'll see what it's done. So I shall enable encryption, and so don't bother about what I'm doing here. We'll see the files, and I'll use AES256. And I'm going to enable this on the server side, and I'll give it a seed value of, say, there's some limit here, but that'll do. Okay. And I could, if I want to enable checksumming as well. It's on the integrity check, server side, and I'll have, say, SHA1, and now save the results file. Save. And then we'll see what it's actually done. Right. So, exit. Right. CD Oracle Home network admin. So vi SQLnet.aura. Right, these are the entries that we'll put in. It really is this simple. We've said enable checksumming using SHA1. Encryption. Oh, I'm missing one entry. Sorry, I've missed one entry here. I need to go to encryption. It's on default of accepted, which makes it a bit clear. Normally, I would have required. I'll just do that. I'll set it to required. Save, rather than leaving that on default. And then Lost my. Oh, I was working here, wasn't I? Get out of that. Quit. And we'll see there'll be now one more entry in there, which is. Don't think I saved it. That's better. Right. So, you can configure encryption at the server side or the client side or both. Right. I would, 99 times out of 100, I would configure it on the server side. It's hard to imagine why a client would be setting up encryption rather than the DBA setting up encryption. Right. So you, the DBA, would do it on the server side. And it really is nothing more than these straightforward 4 entries. So first off, the easiest one, SHA1. So this says that we are going to demand the listener, when it sets up the session, the listener will demand that we do checksumming using the SHA1 algorithm to make sure that nothing was corrupted in transmission. It's that simple. Then we come to the more interesting bits, which are encryption. We nominate the type of encryption, and the usual algorithms there, AES-128, triple DES, and so on, the normal supported algorithms. The seed is in fact optional, but clearly the longer the seed you give, the better encryption level you're going to have. And this is the vital one. Encryption server required. The options are, I think, rejected, accepted, or required. Right. And the default is accepted. So the default of accepted means that clients or servers will do encryption if the other side wants to. And that's why you only have to configure encryption on one side. So configuring it on the server, required. So when a client logs on to this listener, the listener is going to send back to the client, sure, you can log on, but I want to do encryption. And as long as the client is on default of accepted, the client says, yeah, okay. What type of encryption? That. And that's the seed value that we will use for generating the key. Right? And clearly, the longer it is, the better. And that is all there is to it. You just put these entries in your SQLnet.aura file, and all client communications will now be encrypted. It really is that simple. The only time in years now when I've set it up on the client side was for one of our users, and we're running their databases with a hosted service from a cloud server provider. And the cloud vendor that they selected to use doesn't want to enable encryption on the server. I think they're a bit worried about performance. Because if you enable encryption on the server side, you're enabling encryption for absolutely everyone. And of course, they're supporting dozens of databases for dozens of people, not just the one company who we're working with. So because of that, they said, nope, we're not going to do this. Which wasn't a problem. It just meant we had to configure our users to initiate the encryption from their side. And in that case, just on the client side, SQLnet files, you have SQLnet encryption client, encryption types client. Yeah, so it is just a mirror of this. Okay, it's easy. It really is. Right. You can prove it, by the way, if you enable tracing, SQLnet tracing, not SQL tracing. If you enable network tracing, you can see the clear text data going to and fro until you do what we've just done, and then you'll see it as being encrypted. It's quite easy to hack SQLnet traffic. Any network sniffer can do it, unless you go through what we've just looked at here. Okay. Now, I should mention, by the way, that if you're working under Windows, DBCA generates the commands to create the Windows service under which the Oracle database instances run. You just get some extra lines, scripts that DBCA generates. Now, what I'll do is the easiest way to do DataGuard in 5 minutes is to show it to you. Now, Now, what I've got here is two databases. One is called London, and the other is called Berlin. Now, each database has a role. If you look at the critical view is VDOLA database. A VDOLA database is populated from the control file. Now, I'll select name, DB unique name. I'll take DB ID. And also database role and open mode from VDOLA database. Oops, spelling. Right, this thing I'm connected to here, I'm connected to a database whose name is London. Its unique name is Berlin. The difference between name and unique name is important. There's the DB ID, which is a unique identifier for a database. And then we see the database role, physical standby. Open, but open read-only. And I just gave a normal startup. But Oracle realized the instance built in memory, as you can see here, located the control file, mounts the database, open the database. The control file is a standby database control file. That's from the control file. Oracle knows that a standby database can never be opened read-write. Now, my other database is London. And if we look at the London database, database name London, DB unique name London. And note the DB ID is exactly the same. This is what they call a primary, and it's open read-write. So you have one primary, and then one or more standbys, and the various types of standby. And normally, of course, the standby will be on a different machine, different site, or whatever. Right, redo generation. Well, we all know what happens with redo. If we do DML, we generate redo.